Topic for this evening is rolling tips and tricks. So hopefully that's what you signed up for this afternoon. We're going to have a little layout of what the evening will look like. So topics for the evening. Myself and Aidan are going to kind of take you through our rolling journeys and our approach. Like Kipper said, some people have sent in some videos to us, which we really appreciate because it gives us a nice kind of conversation starter. And I think they kind of cover a broad range of the most common issues maybe that people have with the role. And then at the end, we're going to take your questions and answers. All right. Just before we kind of get started on that, anyone who joined us last year might remember this pyramid. I actually would be interested to know how many people are here from last year. If anyone wants to put that into chat to Kipper, maybe he can kind of add up a few bits there now as I'm talking. But yeah, and then anyone maybe who's been at the rolling workshops, the instructor symposium that was up in Donegal last year. That was a fantastic event if you managed to make it. So you would have seen this this pyramid either there or online here last year. At the time we were explaining, there had been a CPD run by the Training and Development Unit, so Canoeing Ireland's Training and Development Unit, TDU, down in Limerick in a pool, and kind of loads of quiet minds got to get together and thinking, well, what are the essentials? What do we need for a role? And this is kind of what was the takeaway of the weekend. So I won't go into too much, but just to kind of lay it out there, at the bottom of the pyramid, we kind of have our confidence upside down, rolling under the spray deck, and orientation upside down. So, you know, do you know where you are while you're upside down? Can you move your body? Can you orientate it forwards, backwards, right and left? The paddle path. So what's the track that our paddle is going to make? Be it whatever style of roll we're using, a sweep roll or a C2C roll or back deck roll, it all kind of has a paddle is linked in there. Our paddle setup, so how we start that, and then any relationship to previous paddle strokes. We kind of felt that that was important as well, that if people had previous experience in moving the paddle in a certain way, that they could link it back to their role. And then the top of the pyramid was linking all of the bits below. So after the workshop up in Donegal, we kind of introduced this, and everybody that came in went into different groups, and they worked away, kind of taking this information and thinking, how might they use it? And this is just one of the takeaways from that workshop up there. And one group kind of flipped it on its head to say that this is how they felt, and that confidence was the most important. Confidence down here at the bottom is the most fundamental element to the whole skill. And I think that's something that maybe both myself and Aidan will be tipping on when we talk about our approaches this evening, and on our own journeys as well. That might come up again. Let's see. So, and then on building on that, then it's what's happening under the spray deck and our own orientation with inside the boat. Do we know where we are at all moments? Can we move ourselves into any particular spot? Then on top of that, again, we kind of have the paddle pad and the paddle setup and the previous skills, and on top of that, again, linking it. So I think that this one, I just wanted to show you that down at the bottom here, because I think it'll link nicely to what we're saying about how the confidence is the foundation to our role, and then maybe levels of confidence then as well, but I might come back to that later. So Aidan's going to come up next and say hello and talk you through his approach and maybe a little bit about his paddling journey.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Kipper, for that introduction. I'll just maybe correct one thing. It's Wexford Waterford ETB, because I might get a slap on the wrist by somebody in the chat later on. But yeah, so I've been kayaking for 22 years. It's kind of a little bit later to kayaking than some of you maybe. Started paddling when I went to college to study outdoor education in what is now called ATU, Castlebar. I'm really fortunate there to get into the class, into my first year class with a group of experienced kayakers in there, so they were happy enough to bring me out. So I kind of progressed fairly quickly. So within a few months, I volunteered. One of the fourth years was doing a project, a dissertation on video analysis in rolling, in coaching rolling. So I got to go to 6 or 8 pool sessions and be coached by one of the fourth years to help my role. After that, I was bitten by the bug of whitewater, so I was doing a lot of whitewater kayaking. I was fortunate enough to kind of do a few trips around the world while I was in college, and experienced that and kind of progressed through kayaking quite quickly. It kind of became my main sport in college. Then kind of went away and worked for a while and worked in the outdoor centres, and for the last 10 years or so I've been working as an adult educator with a brief stint within Canoeing Ireland for the training development role. So kind of working in coach education and training for the guts of 10 years now. So That's really cool. And just recently this year, I just literally graduated last month. I did a master's in applied coaching, and my research topic was on rolling and what happens when people lose their rolling. So I probably have a few informed opinions about rolling and how it's done and what to do it over that experience. But they are just my informed opinions, and you may disagree with them, you may agree with some of them, but they're hopefully food for thought for this evening. In terms of my approach to rolling and maybe kind of coaching rolling as well at the same time, I would kind of agree with the upside down pyramid there. I think there's a couple of things that need to happen in order for people to roll. First one would be like coordination, confidence, and orientation. I think those kind of three things have to be in place. But even before that, there's some elements that people might think of when they're either teaching people rolling or getting around to rolling themselves the first thing. Well, so in my mind, my approach now is I pay particular attention to people's first capsizes, because there's a lot of confidence denting that can happen in people's first capsize if it isn't a nice experience, and that can cause some panic in people as they progress, and then that manifests itself in rolling and getting up really quickly, and maybe leading to one of the common flaws of bringing your head up. So that's really, really important for me. The other thing then is teaching the T-rescue. So in the T-rescues, I really emphasize and focus on the upper and lower body separation to ensure that the kayak is rolling as flat as it can before the body comes up, and that people aren't pushing up with their arms. Again, a really important aspect for me for rolling, that I don't want people putting too much pressure on the paddle. Rather, I want that lower and upper body separation, with the kayak being as flat as it can before the body starts to try to move upwards in the roll. So they're the things that are really important to me. And then I suppose the last one that I would have is I predominantly teach the sweep roll. There's loads of other rolls. I think Ken Whiting said recently there's over 100 rolls. So there's loads of different variations. The fundamentals tend to be the same or are very similar. But for me, I teach the sweep roll, and I teach it for a couple of reasons. One is it offers more time to get support from the paddle, or to get that kind of resistance or initial movement. It tends to be a little bit safer for people to do when they're learning it and not in exposing their shoulders too much. And it tends to work on the important parts of the roll, the lower body movement, and gives people opportunities to do that. And then I kind of just like the idea of using that one roll. I tend to stick, when I'm teaching or coaching people, I tend to stick people to the same approach. So I try not to I can be a bit of a dictator about it, not letting them go off and go down the rabbit holes of YouTube. I try to go to one approach. So the approach that I use quite a lot with people is Acrobatics Calgary or Acrobatics Outdoors. So we have a little resource slide later on that will show it you, but they have a 5-step approach. So that's kind of the one that I use to introduce people to the role as an overview of the role. And it starts with the 5 steps. The first one is the start or the setup. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, probably when we get into the videos, but is where it starts. Then they talk about the pause, and then they talk about the sweep and the knee drive. They've broken them down into two separate steps, but those steps happen at the same time, and then the finish. So that would be kind of my approach. Generally speaking, I will work on the knee drive first. Once people are comfortable and coordinated and orientated in their boats for rolling, I work a lot on the knee drive, and then go back to teaching it kind of sequenced, as I've just outlined there. So I suppose that's in a relatively quick nutshell, that would be kind of my approach to rolling, and a little bit of background about myself.
Cheers, thanks, Aidan. Kipper, did we have any numbers? Is there anybody here last year, or anyone at the rolling workshop up in Donegal? If everybody was there, then I'm going to have to change everything.
If they were there, they're not telling us.
They're not letting us know. That's okay. All right. So a little bit about I was brief bit about my journey. Kipper kind of introduced there. Yeah, I've been actually I just worked it out there. I told Kipper a lie earlier, so 22 years. I've been a Canoeing Ireland member for 23 years. So I can't tell you now when I started kayaking. It's gonna give it all away. Back then, how did I get into it? I walked into my local outdoor centre in Baltinglass and I asked them if I could have a job. And they said, "Can you kayak?" And I was like, "No." So luckily enough, they decided they might take me on as a trainee. So I didn't do an official kind of outdoor instructor traineeship, but I started through my outdoor centre. So from the first time I sat in a boat there to sit in a boat to see what it felt like to give kayaking a go was during a session when there was other kids about. So I was just listening to the instructors saying, right side, left side, turn your kayak here. And I was kind of just mimicking that. So nearly from the first day I sat in the boat, I was also teaching at the same time. Can't say I was very good now back then, but that was, I think that they used to slag me because I was already emptying kayaks before they got around to making sure that I could do my own wet exit. So that was kind of my introduction to kayaking there. And I stayed in the outdoor centre for nearly 10 years before I kind of made the break to become self-employed and set up my own kayak coaching business, GoPaddle.ie, down here in Wexford. But like we kind of travel all over, but predominantly we're down here during the summer. Well, the next thing I kind of going to went to is I'm going to apologize to Kipper now for this, but the name of the workshop was Rolling Tips and Tricks, right? I'd be a strong believer that there are no tricks to rolling, only a solid foundation. And I think if you're coming in, or we all want to get there the quickest, the fastest, what's going to shortcut it for us. And I just don't think that there is that option in a roll. Okay, maybe you're 12 or 13 and you can watch a YouTube video and you can go out and play around in your boat and you can get it just like that. I'm a lot of envy for those people, because I'll tell you my rolling journey now in a second and you'll see where I'm coming from. So in that time when I was in the outdoor centre and it kind of came to the winter and the lads were like, right, we're going to help teach you to roll. We're going to help get you rolling here now. So part of it was in the river and I got lucky enough, some of them was in a pool session. So I wasn't a quick learner to rolling. I think it probably took me the winter, I'd say maybe 6 months or whatever. And I had loads of lovely people showing me, but I don't know that they had any real thought about kind of how this role was going to go for me, or they hadn't got a formula. So when I learned my role, yeah, I was getting up, but not with a whole lot of success. So when I would then go out and do it in anger, it either wouldn't work or I'd fall back in and I'd have a swim. So then the confidence started to go. All right. So that's kind of it, ed into it then. So then I was kind of not doing a roll because I was already thinking it wasn't going to work because I didn't have a great roll. And I was thinking today, God, I'd love a video of myself rolling from back then to show the webinar. Then I thought, probably wasn't doing too many rolls. There's probably more videos of me swimming than there was of rolling. And I kind of went on that way for a few years, I was kind of winging it a little bit, and I was going up through my my skill levels. I got my level 3, I think I even got my level 4, and I remember after my level 4 having a chat with Shane McElliott, and really then I was like, God, I really need to sort this out. Why am I getting it sometimes and why am I not? And I went back and I looked and I kind of like, I recoached myself. I suppose I did a lot of research at that time into what the role should look like, where my body should be, how it should feel like. And it's kind of from then when I recoached myself that I kind of got a bit of a passion for teaching people to roll. And it's where I felt like kind of my understanding, I suppose, really came from then. And for me then, language around the role is really, really important, because when the lads were helping me out, they had this magical term, and it said it was going to get my kayak right up off of me, and it was the hip flick. And I was thinking, right, if I could just flick these hips, if I could just channel my inner Shakira, this kayak was just going to flip over off of me and up I'd come. But I couldn't picture it, other than the fact that I could picture myself standing with like maybe a hula hoop around me, and I was trying to wiggle my hips from one side to the other. That's what I thought I was supposed to do to get the kayak to move. Again, when I went back and I was doing a little bit more research, and maybe that CPD or that workshop I was talking about down in Limerick a good few years ago, when we all came together to chat about what were all the components of the role, I heard about this term knee drive. And I was thinking, oh, that's making a lot more sense to me now. So when I'm rolling, I'm actually using my knee rather than my hips. And I think that thread of language, and Aidan will agree, is going to come through maybe what we're talking about here in the webinar for this evening. And I think language is so important. And the words that we use to describe a specific thing should be visual. It should be easily we should be able to see what each piece we want to do with our body or ask our body to do as well. I suppose maybe to take it a little bit, if I could just maybe I might share my screen again for a second. And I'm going to go back here to this slide in around confidence. So your confidence comes and goes. And I kind of like to think of confidence in levels. So we have our skill level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think we have to have our confidence has to go as our skill level goes up. So confidence, the first one might even be a -1. I think it's our confidence in the pool, our confidence to just be upside down in our boat, looking around in a nice bright swimming pool, swimming to the edge, seeing when we're going. Then our confidence level 1 would be out in still flat, dark water. You know, can we still have that confidence? Confidence level 2, are we in slightly moving water? Confidence level 3, it's things are getting a little bit more swirly here. And as we go up each level, we need to go back to that foundation and check in, is our confidence still there for that environment that we're in? So I think that was probably happening to me a little bit, whereas I was getting it in the pool and the flat water and maybe gentle moving water, but was my confidence wasn't there then in the higher, maybe grade 3, grade 4 environment sometimes, to then even just get myself to execute the role. My brain was going somewhere else. And I think that one, maybe just asking yourself at the minute, where's your confidence in each environment, or have you kind of thought about that? Then my slides will move on a bit, will they? Oh, here we go. Okay, so when it comes to how do I break down the role, or what am I, how am I teaching it? Very similar to Aidan's. We haven't really kind of spoke about what our different ones were before, but they're definitely very similar. The T-Rescue is where it all starts, for me anyway. And that's where people are going to learn about this knee drive. And I think I'm so particular, and probably maybe a little bit too more particular, but when people are doing their T-Rescue, that they're coming up out of the water with their face down. Because if you're coming up out of the water and your T-Rescue looking forward, that's what you're going to bring forward into your role. So kind of at that very start point, making sure you're coming up, really using your knee, light in your fingers, and turning your shoulders to look down. And you'll see why next, okay? We've got our paddle set up, so taking our time, getting the paddle up out of the water. I like to try and tell people to have like a little gauge, maybe somewhere on the side of the kayak, that your wrists can find when you're upside down. That's a little bit of an orientation point for your hands. Then our body wrap. This was a question that came up last year, so I kind of put this one in. So what does the body wrap look like? What is it? So it's a bit accentuated there, because I kind of, when I took the screenshot, I was sort of halfway through the roll, but it's getting your body out to one side of the kayak. When I was starting and I was told to tuck forwards, I kind of was tucking forwards with my head nearly down, you know, where the tab is for my spray deck, rather than getting it out to the side of the kayak. And when you can see there, when you're out to the side, you've got so much more room to move your paddle through the water, okay? And you're not dangling down underneath your kayak either, kind of, you know, like 2 foot under the kayak, you're wrapped up around the side, so you're a little bit more protected in that position as well. And then the paddle path, so it's the path that you're going to paddles take for whatever particular stroke, or whatever particular style of roll you're using, be it your sweep roll or your C2C roll, and that it's coming right out in that arc, okay, away from the boat. So that's something I really kind of get people to focus on early, is moving the paddle away from the boat. Other thing, the paddle wrap, or wrapping your body around the boat. So back to this, when you wrap your body right around the boat, if you do that, you're much less likely to pull the paddle down to the riverbed or to the floor of the swimming pool. Okay, if you're wrapped around, you're going to it's much easier for you to sweep that paddle out into an arc, out the way you want it to go, rather than taking it from the side of the kayak down to the riverbed. Your knee drives then, really focusing on that knee. So if it's a right-handed roll, it's going to be right-handed knee. If it's a left-handed roll, you're using your left knee. And that should be like, that should be 100%, 120% at the T-Rescue before you even kind of think of taking it to your roll. And then the finish. So for this one, for me, is really important. Because I think on my rolling journey, I've been getting people to do all the other steps, and then at the end, they might just fall back in again. There wasn't something there to kind of help people. So when you're rolling and you come down, and I like to get people to even just to try that position that's on the screen there. That was at the end of a roll, but you can do that position before you've ever taken a roll. Having your one hand, so I call my top hand, the one that's on the highest part of the kayak, so my left hand here, should never be crossing the center line or over to the right hand side of my body. That left hand should stay up here, kind of looking down on the paddle. And this wrist, my right wrist, is ever so slightly rolled back so that I can lean on it, or I can scull it forward. So I can either scull it forwards to give myself a little bit more support, or I can scull it forwards and I'm ready to go straight into a forward stroke. So I'm ready to link it to something else. But when you're learning your roll, I think if you're almost up, and to save yourself having to go with the paddle back to your tail to find a bit more pressure, stopping at your hips and then coming forward with that little bit of a scull, and I call it the finish there. Some videos you'll see it accentuate a little bit more, so that they call it shedding water. But I actually think still being able to lean on it is quite nice. That's kind of, oops, let me go back here. So that's sort of my approach and my my thoughts around the roll. Yeah, we might just stop that there now for a second. Kieran, did we get any questions in, or?
We did. We've one from two from Damien. In terms of paddle ability, is there a way to teach an individual how to roll who has no hip flick? For example, a person who's paralyzed from the waist down. Before you guys come into this, as an organization, we've looked at this. It has come across our radar recently, so we are looking at this as what we can do, because it is a tricky one. But I don't know if Aidan or Susan, if you have experience with this.
I've never tried to teach anybody paralyzed from the waist down how to roll, but just I saw that question a little bit earlier on. There was a video a while back of a guy who was paralyzed from the waist down and was surf kayaking, and then there's another video about a guy who had a great support network and used to paddle like fairly hard white water. So kind of interesting maybe to do a little bit of research into that and maybe find those videos, and we could message them or whatever and see that they must have some sort of self-rescue kind of situation for the environments that they were in, so perhaps it would, they figured out some way to roll, but I haven't come across it before. So yeah,
and I'll actually come in there on that. That one of those guys is Jeff Good, and he's an Irish athlete who competed in the wave ski worlds last winter. So we'll follow up with Jeff and see if he has any feedback on that. Susan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I haven't had a chance to help anybody in that situation yet, but there's again, I'd need to do a little bit of research, and maybe later throughout the webinar I can do a little bit of sneaky on Google. But there was definitely a video, and I think it came out of Japan. And I remember watching the video. They seemed to be just on the ocean, where somebody had come up with a way of moving the kayak. I can't remember, I'll have to remember it, but yeah, the person was paralyzed from the waist down, and there was kind of a detailed video that they had put together of them and their coach, how they'd kind of come around this. And kind of remember they had a way of manipulating the kayak over. I can't remember if they were pushing with one hand as they were rolling. I'd need to go and look into it now and find a link. But yeah, there's definitely, people have started to look into that, and there's ways out there.
There's a second part of Damien's question. Does the length of your paddle affect your brace support while rolling? I recently heard that bigger paddlers need longer paddles to support their brace while rolling to compensate for body weight. Is this true?
Well, it is physics, I suppose. So the longer the lever, the more force you can exert. So yeah, in that sense, a longer paddle, and some people talk about extended paddle rolls to do that, to increase the leverage to overcome maybe mobility, flexibility issues. However, I think you're probably putting a bit of a plaster or a bit of a band-aid over it. You should really be looking at the fundamentals, the lower body movement, trying to make sure that the body is connected through the move, and making sure that lower body, rather than trying to paste over the cracks, for want of a better word, with a longer paddle, which is going to over long term introduce more forces into your shoulders, potential for exposing your shoulders and increasing perhaps the risk of injury. So
Great stuff, Damien. Damien, if you want to pop us on an email, particularly with the first, in relation to the first part of the question, we can follow up on that. Somebody has put in, Sean B has put in that the link to that role, I think. Keith is asking, is your kinetic energy compromised when bringing your head to the side? In the photo, it looks as though the core wouldn't be engaged.
Oh, that's a great question. So when I'll show some videos maybe in a second. We'll get into this, I think, in a little bit more. But
Okay.
so your shoulders, for me, need to follow the paddle. Okay, so it's an unwinding of your core. So it's not just that your head is going on its own, and I don't think that it should. And I remember even a time where my head obviously must have gone the wrong way, and the people who were helping me were trying to get me to put like a sponge in here and hold my head to one side. So now I couldn't roll very well, but now I couldn't roll very well with my ear stuck to my shoulder. Okay, I had even less mobility. But if you can follow your paddle blade around with your shoulder, it's an unwinding of your body. So I would say you're increasing your kinetic energy. You're taking a bit and you're unwinding that up. Sorry, can you read the second part of the question for me there as well, Kipper?
It looks as though the core wouldn't be engaged.
Oh no, the core is very much engaged because you're rotating it around with the paddle. And I think when I play some videos, it'll maybe be a little bit more obvious in that then. We might go and have a look at some of the videos that have been sent in, Aidan. What do you think? Yeah.
Just one sec
Yep.
there. There's a question in from Irene. Susan, did you say at the end of your roll, do you bring your body forward as finish? Question mark.
Yeah, so either upright or forward. Upright's fine. Or forward if you're kind of wanting to be in kayak and in sea kayak. I know you're doing a little bit of sea kayak now as well, Irene. They'll call it the storm roll. So you're tucked right forward at the very end. And again, it's just whatever environment that you've been in, that you've rolled up in, something has turned you over or something has caused stability, whether it's a wave or some river feature. So I think being forward and getting that center of gravity down low and ready to either take your forward stroke or brace or whatever's going to come next, rather than sitting upright is fine, but behind the vertical that's where you're going to be slightly off balance again.
Perfect. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, cool. Rightio. Again, you might just give me a minute now to need to line up the video and then click out and then click back in. Alrighty, so we might go through these videos kind of in the order we got them. So I'm going to bring up one here now. Go ahead there.
just share your screen, Sue, as well.
And there we go. Can you guys see that one now?
Yeah.
Lovely. All right. And thanks very much to the person who sent this in. We're just going to let it play through a couple of times so you guys kind of at home can have a look at it as well. Go ahead there. Cool. So I'm going to put my instructor hat on here now, and I'm going to ask Aidan some questions. And I think if there's any instructors watching, that this might be a nice tool for you to use yourself, either on yourself or with somebody else that might be helping a role. So I'm going to let the video play again, and I might just slow it down a little bit. And I'm going to ask Aidan, just what do you see? Okay, so we're not asking him for any answers really or anything. We're just kind of asking him what does he see kind of happening here. So
Okay, so if you look, if maybe scroll back just there a second, just so people can understand what I'm talking about. You can see the start of the roll before the person capsized. And I think it's hard to tell from the email, but I think it's D. So I'm just going to refer to this person as D. You can see their body position is quite forward at the start. So what Susan was talking about earlier on in the setup is that body's position should be more neutral in the kayak, but try to be wrapped around the side of the kayak. And from an instructor point of view, this is one of the issues that I would have with rolling, and what makes rolling a kind of a tricky technique to learn is that it's very hard to practice the elements of the roll accurately the right way up. Okay, so when this person capsizes, then you can see that being a little bit forward, if they came maybe more back to neutral and wrapped themselves around, they did a very good job of getting their hands up above the water, to be fair, but they can maybe get a little bit more out of that. And again, it's just simple physics that the closer to the water, the closer to the surface of the water you are, the less forces to move you the distance to get back upright. Whereas if you're forward, you tend to be under the kayak a little bit more, thus requiring more forces to get you back into the upright position. So remember, I suppose this roll is called a sweep roll, or the roll that we're going to see here is called a sweep roll. So the idea of a sweep roll is, it comes from the sweep stroke, and our body should rotate around as the lower body is doing its movement. So it's a kind of a twofold movement. The lower body is doing one movement and the upper body is doing the second movement. So the second thing that I would see here is the lower body movement is reasonably good and reasonably dynamic, and starts maybe just a little bit late in the paddle movement. But as they come up, that top hand that Susan referred to, look at that position of that top hand. So what would be her left hand is now almost down around her belly button and way out to the sides, which means that the hands have really come across the boat and left her in an unstable position, or an unstable finish. And she's able to manage to get upright there. So fair play to it. Shows that her lower body movement is actually reasonably good, but in a more turbulent water, whether that be in the sea or in white water, that finish position might cause a few issues and stuff like that. So trying to kind of rotate the upper body a little bit more, rather than bringing the hands across the body and then finishing it off, like Susan said, that maybe sculling back into a forward position to kind of anticipate. So if you just pause it there, just back a few. So just there, yeah, that's her body position's quite far back. Her hands and the paddle are now across and back in the rear quarter, just behind her hip. So there's very little stability in that position. So if there was a wave or a rock or another feature or another person coming in to help them, it's likely that roll would fail at that point and you wouldn't get up. So for me, the two kind of key points that I would say in this video would be, one, the setup, trying to wrap out more around the side of the kayak and get up as high to the surface as you possibly can. Timing it, the lower body movement happening a little bit earlier in the sweep, and then the finish position, really finishing off that roll a little bit better. So sculling forward with the paddle and bringing the body into either neutral or slightly forward to regain that stability over the widest part of the kayak around the knees. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that Aidan has said there. And I just, if the person, hopefully they're watching here now, pause in that position. It's hard to tell from the video, but it looks like their top hand is stacked above their lower hand, with the bottom, that part of the paddle pointing towards the swimming pool roof. If that left hand could be kept a little tighter, a little smaller over on that left side. So like your sweep stroke, it's a long, your paddle is nearly horizontal. Is that the right word? Vertical? Horizontal? Yep. Horizontal. It's sweeping out across the surface. You don't, when you're doing your sweep strokes, you don't tend to bring this hand high. If you do, you're digging deep, or that's more of your position for a draw stroke. Okay, so you want to keep in, so same in the roll, want keeping that left hand down a little bit more, so it's not getting out to stack one on top of the other of the paddle that you're using there. But you're coming up, well done, fair play to you. All right, that's probably the hardest bit mentally, is to break through that first couple of rolls where you're actually able to come up. So now you've mentally broken that barrier, because we all wonder when we're learning our roll, are we ever actually going to get it? Are we ever actually going to come up? And now we're coming up. So now is time to tweak. You know, you can start adding little bits more in and improve in small little bits at a time, rather than trying to improve everything in one go. Cool.
I think it's important to remember from the role to like once you're kind of getting it, the thing that I like to try keep in mind with my learners is firstly it's a dynamic movement, but it's not a powerful movement. So it shouldn't feel like any area is particularly strained or overexerted. It should be a nice smooth. And oftentimes trying to just like maybe slow the roll down and just get it nice and smooth and feel like you're not pulling too much. So something that I might do to kind of play around with to see what kind of pressure people are putting on their paddles is if you just hold the shaft of the paddle like that, so with your index finger and your thumb around the paddle without the other grippy fingers taken into account, and try to roll like that, and it really forces you to take that pressure off and to rely on that lower body movement. And if there's any paddle diving deep that Susan has just said, where you're bringing your hands over and you're not maximizing the support, or you're trying to pull on the paddle a little bit too much, that finger grip will really expose that. So that might be something to try for yourself going forward as well.
Cool.
We just have
Yeah, go for it.
a question there, guys. When I try to wrap my body to roll, it feels like my non-rolling knee is keeping me down. Takes ages to unwind enough to allow the rolling knee to engage. I end up very far back on the back of my boat.
Do you read that question again, Kip?
Read it yourself.
Yeah.
It's all about the knee that isn't engaged,
Okay.
causing some difficulty.
I wonder, can I pull up a video or a picture of me doing a roll, and maybe we can slot it in there. Let me see if I can.
That was a joke, Aidan. I will read it again if you want.
You read it again, Kipper, while I'm trying to load up a video.
Okay, perfect. Okay. When I try to wrap my body to roll, it feels like my non-rolling knee is keeping me down. Takes ages to unwind enough to allow the rolling knee to engage. Takes a.
Okay.
I end up very far back in the back of the boat.
So I suppose I would be asking the question there of what type of upper body movement are you doing? Are you rotating or are you rowing? So there's a difference. So rotating, if I'm sitting here in my chair, that's a rotation, yeah. Whereas if I sit, this is a row, yeah. So if you're rowing to try get your paddle into position, so i.e. you're falling back like this, yeah, then you'll be really far back on your boat by the time you get to induce your knees. But if you're rotating around, you're still going to be more forward. So that might be a first thing to kind of have a look at. I'm not sure, without seeing what's going on, it's kind of difficult to abstractly think about. I've never had that issue myself where I felt like my opposite knee was pulling me down. The other thing that you could try, and this is just off the top of my head, if you have a video of yourself, it might be worth sharing that video with us later on, and we could definitely, image.
We have it already. We have that video already. That's been sent in to us. We have that.
Cool. So
okay, cool.
We'll have a look at it in a sec then, and we might be able to decipher that. But the thing I was going to say there is, in the role when I'm using my lower body, I think about lifting the knee, so the knee drive, the one that's going to be activated, but I also consciously push with my opposite foot. So that might take away, if you think about consciously pushing with your opposite foot, that might take away the feeling or the kind of thought that you have about that knee is keeping you down. So that might be something to do. And I like to do that. Even you can do that above the water, and you can kind of feel that if you lift your knee and push with the opposite foot, you can feel there's a slightly more dynamism, or it's a little bit more dynamic in the movement. So maybe trying that when you're upside down, of thinking about pushing with your opposite foot as well. So yeah, hopefully we'll have a look at the videos. I suppose really the thing to do is to kind of go through the videos and then maybe answer some more of those questions as we go.
Okay, all right. Get the next video lined up here. So this is the second one that was sent in to us. Hold on there now. Again, thank you so much to whoever sent this in for play to you. Looks like you're on your rolling journey. You may be in on an outdoor course or something. Looks like there's a couple of you guys there all in similar uniform, getting ready for assessment soon. So best of luck. Again, I'm going to play this through a few times so everyone can have a look, and then we might slow it down and see what do we really see. Okay. We'll just take another look here again. Okay, I'm going to just have a little rewind here, and I'll probably just talk through my thoughts of what I see, I suppose, there. So I see person set up, I see them tucked quite far forward. All right, so I wonder when they hit the water, does their body position change from being tucked forward to out to the side? Okay, so we've got a nice setup here, paddles clear of the water. What's happening next? Okay, reaching out. So that looks like a C to C there. So they've got the paddle out. So that takes a lot of flexibility to get into that position there. Well done. And then from there, okay. So see this next frame. Can you see that backhand? It's shooting forward. And look, it's already on the spray deck. So it's, and look how that paddle is pointing straight up to the sky. That's what I see. So it's very hard to get any pressure down off of that. So even if you're really trying to use that bottom knee, the paddle is diving there because the movement of your left hand is what I feel like I see here now. We'll come to Aidan in a second. All right. And I'd love to know if the person is here, if they're agreeing or disagreeing. So there looks lovely. And from there, I'd be literally turning my face, looking down, knee up, one swift movement. But I'd be trying to keep that left hand nice and still, just letting the boat pass under it.
This video isn't related to the previous question about the lower knee.
Okay, okay, that's okay. All right. Aidan, you seeing anything that I'm not seeing? You see anything different?
Will you just go back to the very start of the video and decide on for the setup or for the start, go back a little right at the very start, the upright setup.
From here?
Yeah, so the first couple of things I'll say are actually not necessarily related to your technique. I think that's a Dagger Stratos, which is quite a wide, rounded boat, and depending on how tall you are and stuff in the boat, it might be hard to kind of have such a wide boat underneath you when you're rolling. So it might be something if you have other boats there, access to try a different boat. The other one then, and I'm going to make a bit of an assumption here, but it looks like that person is wearing a Palm Extreme buoyancy aid, where the pocket sticks out really, really far from the buoyancy aid. So when they're trying to lean forward there, that buoyancy aid's kind of getting in the way. So if you want to maybe play around with, maybe when you're trying to figure out the roll, reduce what's in your pocket, or maybe try a slightly different buoyancy aid. But the other thing there, that this is like, if Susan just puts her cursor on it there, you can see how forward the body position is. So I'd love that person to be sitting a little bit more upright, and then to wrap around the kayak. When they go into the water, you just stop at that point. Okay, a little bit further. So you can see just that point there, that paddle, the front paddle blade, isn't on top of the water or near the water. It's actually quite deep. So when they move it then to that 90 degrees, if you can scroll to that bit, Sue. So they try to move it. Look how deep the paddle is in the water. So if the person can kind of wrap themselves out around the side more and get their body out to the side a little bit more and try get that paddle a little bit closer to the surface, they'll have a little bit more support from the surface tension of the water, so they'll lose the support the deeper the paddle goes into the water. So you want to try get the paddle up as high as you possibly can. And then there's just a little kind of maybe trying to think about what you're doing while you're doing it. There's a little sequence break that goes on. So Susan talked about the paddle shooting forward with the front arm and the paddle staying really deep. It's now like your hands are stacked on top of each other again, and you're not getting any momentary support from the paddle in order to allow your lower body to roll the boat out of the way. So and it's probably just for what kind of seen here quickly is just a little sequencing issue that the paddle is going before the body has gone. So those two need to be synced a little bit more in my mind. So it's a couple of things that are going a little bit awry for me there. One is just I think you could do something with a little bit playing around with boat setup. And maybe that buoyancy aid to give you a little bit more ability to move while you're learning the role. And then just the sequencing and trying to keep that paddle a little closer to the surface. And I think that might help maybe progress your role a little bit more. I think the sequence, and once you get that a little bit more stacked, and you can kind of get control of that top hand going forward, I think you might see a little bit more success in your attempts.
Thanks very much, Aidan. Kipper, as a freestyle paddler yourself, is there anything that you'd like to add?
The wise man's once said, just don't capsize. But that's not always achievable. No, I think you guys have covered a lot there. Aid pressure is one thing I'd always find, and particularly if you're in more turbulent conditions, that you're looking to find that blade pressure, and that can be in different positions as you go. So you always keep an eye on the blade pressure. And it's funny, I'm paddling a while and it was always sit forward, but I like that idea of that kind of wrap gets you around. That makes a lot of sense, you know.
If I could use you as my student here, okay? If you were to keep your shoulders square and sit forward, okay, like you have, so just to sit slightly forward there now, right? Sit in your set up position. So you have your hands here like you're set up. Now try and move that top hand out to swing the paddle away. Okay. Now I want you to sit out here, turn your shoulders out. Now how much space have you got to swing that top hand out?
that. The third video we have is the person who was asking the question of the lower knee. If you want to have a look at that one, maybe.
I'll do that up there now.
We'll see if there's any more questions.
I feel like I'm on the late for Gay Byrne. I'll cue that up there now.
Roll that there, Roisin.
Roll it there, Roisin. Showing me age here now. There's probably a lot of people watching and like, I don't know what they're talking about there. Okay, and you might talking.
So guys, just as we're kind of coming to the third video here, we might show a video of Susan, but then after that, we're kind of going to open it up for some questions. So just it might, if you're a bit of a slow typer, you can throw your questions in at any time. So we'll have a few questions at a time at the end as well. So
easy questions only, no hard ones, please. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Here we have a boat, and I'm hoping the participant is okay for us to speak by their first name. What do you reckon, Kipper?
Sure, we're all friends here.
We all know this lovely lady. We'll call her Irene. And Irene's been on a rolling journey now for a while. She's like myself, it wasn't as straightforward, I don't think, all at the start. So I'm going to play it a few times again, and then we might go back to just what can we see, right? So before we kind of break down to any analysis of what's going wrong or what we think it should look like, we might just talk through what do we see, and then we can have a look at then what can we fix. But if we're not really clear on what we see, and I think if you're helping people with your role, be very clear on what you see before you start jumping into what needs to be fixed. Okay. Another little look. Super quick roll, Irene. In over. Okey-doke. All right. So I might break it down here a little bit into what I see, and then I'll go to Aidan to see if he wants to fill in any blanks that I'm missing. So we've got our paddler tucked, I would say, more out to the side than forward. Okay, they're getting their body out to the side. In they go. So just while we stop them here, and lads, correct me now, so with this knee here beside their right hand, that's their non-rolling knee. So that's the knee the person was saying is in the way. Is that, am I correct in saying that? And they might just put a yes in the comment. The one here next to their rolling hand. So that's the one you're saying, because this one over this side is going to be their rolling knee. Okay, so let's just see what we have. So we've got the paddle set up. Okay, what I see there now, I see the paddle moving down and out. So it went down and then out. Okay, we're out at about 90 degrees here now. I see the paddle at 90 degrees. I see the body of the kayaker back behind the paddle. Okay. Okay, now in this moment, I see the top hand, the left hand, coming across the body. Right, and our paddle sinking with our body sweeping around onto the back deck of the kayak. Throw the hand for balance, and up she comes. Ta-da. Aidan, would you like to add in anything that you see on top of what I see before we kind of maybe think about where we could help this person then?
Just play it through one more time. I think there's a very dynamic lower body movement.
Yeah, there's a good look at the sharpness of that.
Yeah.
That really, that boat is being moved off the person quite well. So
And I suppose to look at the body and head position and for the boat to still end upright is actually more indication to me that the lower body movement was good. The issues I would have would be it looks a little bit out of sequence, or the timing of it is a little bit off. Yeah. And I think the hands are a little bit too active. That's what I'm observing. Or the hands are active. I suppose to be more neutral about it.
yeah, yeah. So for my top tips, if I was standing in the pool beside this person, here I'd be encouraging a more an outward movement with the paddle initially, right? Not bad once it gets going. From here then, right? So look, that strong knee. So the knee, we can see the moment the knee is being engaged, and it's this bottom knee here is the one that's being engaged. That's the active knee. This one is more passive, it's a minute. And from here, so we're needing extra blade pressure in this moment. Okay, so this is the moment where I'd like to be seeing the paddle move from forward for extra support, but that can only happen. So we need the paddle to be, it can't be horizontal, it can't be flat to the water because the boat's in the way, but it can be from just beside the boat down onto the water. Okay, the fact that it's pointing so upward, and Kipper rightly spoke about blade pressure. When you're a freestyle paddler, when you've been paddling for a number of years, you're going to paddle, you're going to roll off blade pressure. But to find blade pressure when we're learning, that's why we have these sweeping actions, sweeping rolls or C2C rolls, and we have different styles to teach us blade pressure. And once we have that, then we can kind of come up from anywhere. But to get blade pressure here now, we need to have our blade in a more of a sweep stroke, or our paddle in more of a sweep stroke position. So it's sweeping out rather than down. Okay, so we can find blade pressure. And then there's a little scoop on the paddle there. That is actually giving our paddler a little bit of pressure as they pull that paddle in. Okay, so they can kind of get the last ounce of pressure out of that blade so they can throw their body back, arm out for balance and up. Kipper, has our paddler put in any kind of clarification around that knee, or any questions there they'd like to see answered?
To your original comment about which knee it was, you were correct, and we got a yes. So
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so does that mean that when you're wrapping, they feel like their knee is in their way when they're wrapping? In the wrap?
Let me go back to the question. Feels like the non-paddling knee is keeping me down.
Okay, are you engaging it? Because if you're engaging that knee, well, then it's definitely going to pull the kayak back on top of you. All right. And I would be encouraging them to see how much of a problem this is. And I'm not saying after this webinar, Susan Doyle says you have to take one knee out of your kayak to roll. No, to play around and to problem solve, maybe take that non-rolling knee out of the tire rest and see, is it having a big effect? Okay, so then you can disengage it completely, know that you're not using it, and then you can use your active or your rolling knee, which is this one over here. Unless they're just saying it because the way their body is wrapped, that it's not allowing them to get around their kayak. But it doesn't look to me like that's an issue from this body position here. They're well wrapped there. Look, going into the water, they're right over that non-rolling knee. So okay, all right.
Excellent.
Let me just stop that share there. And maybe we took a few videos.
Our paddler is saying, okay, I'll go back to the paddle float for that bit of problem solving, I guess, to see how those knees are,
Yeah.
to focus in on that knee, take the pressure off the roll and zone in on the knee and see what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
and
idea.
the paddle float, like sea kayakers will be aware of them, using for re-entry or I don't know, having your lunch or something. Not sea kayakers, sorry. But it's like a big fancy armband. You blow up both sides and you shove your paddle in. For the river paddlers who haven't come across one, and I just think for problem solving they are brilliant because you can slow down your roll literally. Kind of like we did in the videos, you can slow motion to each step, slow. You can even come back and really problem solve and feel where things are happening or they're not happening. You can ask yourself what you're doing, and because you don't have to focus so much maybe on your blade and getting everything right to come up, you can play around with different parts of your roll. You can pause yourself in different places and say, well, where am I looking now? Am I looking down? Am I looking up? What am I doing now? Which knee do I think I have the most pressure on? You can kind of like in that video, you can slow everything down and ask yourself little questions along the way. And I just think for problem solving, and they're an excellent tool to have.
I would kind of say that, yeah, because what's missing there is the moment of support from the paddle. And there's a little bit of sequencing issue there that your lower body movement is good. Your setup is good. I reckon you could be a little bit more neutral. I think you're a little bit forward in your setup. So you could play around with being a little bit more neutral. But your lower body movement's good because you wouldn't have gotten up from that position. Essentially, you did a hand roll. Or like a kind of a paddle assisted hand roll, essentially. So you're not getting a lot of support from the paddle. So maybe when you move into more turbulent water and stuff like that, that would be a terrible position to be finishing the roll in. So you need to figure out the sequence as so that you can get the support from the paddle when your lower body needs the support from the paddle. And that will allow you to finish in a better position, and then you won't have to try what I call throw the head for the win. So if you just look at the bottom of this roll here, it gets obstructed by the paddle, but you're trying to throw your head for the win. That's green there. So you can see your head has come across the center line of the kayak to try get the weight of your head to the other side to make sure that the kayak flattens out, rather than maybe engaging what was the passive knee in kind of pulling that both flat and pulling your body weight forward so you could have a better positioning. So the takeaways from me would be the sequencing to get the support from the paddle when you need it, as opposed to when you don't need it, and then trying to not to throw your head for the win, and maybe engaging that what was the passive knee a little bit more to create a better finishing position.
Cool. Thanks very much, Aidan.
Fantastic. Do we have any more questions there, guys?
So we'll just maybe bring up the video that you took in the pool, as to show maybe a model of what we're talking about. So Sue and I's totally unconsciously or subconsciously, our roles have our approaches have come together, and what we think is important happens to be. So we managed to get a roll of Susan either in the pool or in clash that shows
Yeah.
Susan doing a roll that kind of talks or will show you some of the points that we're talking about a little bit more.
So maybe I'll do like we did all the other videos, Aidan, and I'll let this play through once or twice, and then I might go in slow motion. And if you could verbalize what you see, and I'm not saying by any means that I have the most perfect roll, but I'm just trying to get all the ingredients in place. And this is what works for me, and it worked for me when I recoached myself, and it's what I teach now going forward.
So let's just watch it one more time in silence, and then I'll kind of talk through. Okay, so the first thing is actually Susan has made this more difficult for herself because she'll admit herself she's not the tallest person in the world, but and she's in a relatively wide boat given her size, so that actually makes the rolling a little bit more difficult. But you can see she's been able to compensate for that by being able to get around the side of the kayak. Her body position is maybe slightly forward, just slightly forward of neutral, but she's able to wrap around the kayak. So you just let it kind of capsize to the other side. She's actually kind of going with the momentum and coming around to the other side. When the boat settles, okay, just pause it there. Look how far that paddle blade is above the water, okay? So that's to me telling me that you can't get into that position unless you're wrapped around the side of the kayak. And actually a funny maybe idiosyncrasy about Susan's role, and if you watch the videos back from last year, Shane McElligot's role is the first bit of the roll with the paddle movement actually starts above the water. Which is a good thing to get into because sometimes you're in turbulent and non-aerated water. So getting up onto this, as far onto the surface of the water as you possibly can, gives you more potential for support. So we just scroll through there, Sue. So she started to move the paddle out to the side. You can see the boat is moving very rapidly. So as she started to move the paddle, she started to move the boat. And then she's coming up. Look at where her head is. Look at her shoulders. And then this is the finish. I think this is the clinch, the bit that we want to emphasize. This is her wrist is cocked, and she's going to start bringing herself and the paddle forward into that finish position. Just let it play through then. Yeah. Okay.
I
So
have
what?
a river today where I definitely in my own kayak and with all my own gear on I don't know if I get that paddle as clear out of the water as I do in the swimming pool here when I don't have a bind set and a dry suit and all those other bits on. So I could throw that on for you as well, just to show the difference maybe as well.
Yeah, throw up the one you got today, Sue, and I think that's a good kind of real work. Because yeah, you're right. In the pool, I often encourage people when we're learning to roll in the pool to actually wear their buoyancy aid because it gives them the range of motion that they would actually have when they're trying to do the roll. And that's a really important thing for when you're moving your roll. You're happy with your roll in your pool or your static environment like a lake or whatever. When you're moving it into maybe more dynamic environment or moving it from the pool, it's good to have kind of some real world practice of it. So again, you can see start to position. Yeah. Okay. So see when she comes around and the boat settles. Okay. So this is Susan in all her gear in probably about 10 million layers because this is outside
Today,
and
freezing.
freezing. Yeah. So she's still able to get her hands and her head. And look, we can almost see her helmet is nearly breaking the surface there. So her paddle is almost fully out of the water at this point as well. So she's able to get right up to the surface of the water. The narrower, the small ripper is a little bit narrower than the boat she was in the pool. So that's will help this as well. She's rotating around. Look at that backhand. It's not shooting forward like we saw in the other videos. In my mind, the hand is still in front of the shoulders all the way around. It hasn't passed out the shoulders. And then as she's coming up and she's happy and confident, look at her body position come forward. So she's leaning forward now. She's finished. The paddle is still there in front of her hips in a nice supporting manner as the boat flattens out. She's emphasizing looking at the paddle. Having seen Susan roll for real, she doesn't finish her roll like that all the time, but it's good practice while you're learning to finish the roll, kind of trying to look down the shaft of the paddle or look at the blade. So just go through it maybe one more time there, Sue. Oops.
Sorry. I was going to bring up one. I tried to try and incorporate maybe some of the common. You can tell me here, Aidan. Here's a test now. I won't say which one this is, right? I was trying to think of some of the other common errors that might happen or more false with kayak and kayak roll. Let's see if you can tell me where I'm going wrong in this one now.
So, chocolate bar challenge in the comments. First one to get it right. Chocolate bar sent out, courtesy of Canoeing Ireland. Yeah. So if you want to just scroll through it there, okay. So I think when we're kind of teaching rolling, where we're looking at rolling ourselves, it's really important that we try find the root causes and to identify them. And sometimes we see something that's happening as one thing, but it's actually something else. Okay. So what I'm observing here, just kind of in a non-neutral way, is her position is good. Her hands, her paddle position, she swept it out to the side. But as often the case in cold water, it looks like the head has come first. So it's a little bit of maybe of a chicken and egg situation of whether has the head come up first and caused the knee to the passive knee, so that knee there, thanks Sue, has that the head coming up first caused that to engage, or has the knee engaged first and now you're trying to win it with your head, and that's why your head is kind of coming up first. So that's something to kind of play around with if you're struggling with that. When you get your knee or your head involved in the roll in the way that Susan has it there, it tends to put pressure on what is the non-rolling knee, or the knee not involved in the drive, and actually causes the boat to fall back over on itself. So if the passive knee becomes active too early in the roll, it actually pulls the boat back over on top of yourself, and you'll do it. So what I would like to see there is the knee drive happening a little bit more, and the correction I might ask Sue to try would be to maybe push with the opposite foot to try take the emphasis off that passive knee, and then also to think about maybe finishing looking down into the water or look down along the paddle to try help that head stay that she's not trying to throw it for the wind. So yeah, like that one there. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking of as well as I'm observing that.
Cool. Chocolate bar goes to you, Aidan. Well done. I was most definitely pulling hard on my non-rolling knee, my left knee, my top knee, and I was only trying to pull on it to see if I could emphasize, and I was surprised at how far my head actually came up out of the water just by pulling on that knee. Don't play around with these ones too often.
It was interesting there as well. The stern engaged in the water and the bow popped up as well a little bit. So
when I was pulling on the wrong knee there,
yeah, you can see it here. You can see the bow pops up. So that's the boat design coming into play there. So, but only in a bad roll, I'm sure. We had some other contenders for the chocolate bar, Irene and Sean B. Question from Killian in My Next Adventure down in County Clare. When you push with opposite foot to active knee, how much pressure?
Depends is the usual question, usual answer.
But you mentioned earlier on, Aidan, that none of it should be full power. It should feel nice. It should feel so.
Yeah, rolling is not a power move. It's a dynamic technique. move. So rolls should feel smooth. It shouldn't feel like you're overstraining anything. It shouldn't feel like you're trying to break the footrest of your kayak by pushing with your opposing feet. My top tip for everybody would be the next time you get in your kayak, whatever is your your active knee in your roll in your onside roll, just lift that up and push with the opposite foot, and you just see the amount of extra dynamic movement you get from those two opposing forces. And just play around with that. And sometimes people, it helps people to engage the knee a little bit more by giving them a foot to push against. So that's what I would suggest. So to give it a go the next time. How much pressure depends on your body size, how much strength you have, but it's not supposed to be like, I'm not trying to break the footrest or anything. It's just, I suppose some people like, it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just like positive pressure. So you're giving you're giving your knee something to move against by pushing with the opposite foot. Yeah.
Sean B wants to know, can we get a copy of Susan's videos of the roll? I think what we might do is put a little package together maybe in the next few days, and send stuff out then maybe, or put it up on our website or something. That might be a good idea, you know. Okay, that's any more questions before?
I suppose one thing on the side of trying to create Susan's role if you're not Susan. So there's little adaptations that Susan has made. So and her body and the way in which she rolls and her boat and stuff like that will kind of maybe change the way she rolls ever so slightly. What we were trying to do this evening is kind of emphasize what we think are the fundamentals and importance to us. So if you're using the Susan's videos and stuff like that, try to use them to figure out what the fundamentals are and how the fundamentals are working, as opposed to trying to replicate what is a very effective role, but it's Susan's role. So
yeah. Unless you're 5'2" in small ripper, then we might be the same. But yeah, if I'm 6'5" and in a sea kayak, I don't know if we'll both have the same.
Okay, we'll give another minute or two for more questions. They seem to have slowed down. But while there, I want to thank Aidan for his great work tonight, and Susan. And Susan was out making videos today for tonight's session, so that's brilliant. And again, for Susan's suggestion to send in the video, so that was great as well. So thanks a million, guys. We've the next few sessions of our winter series. Events is next, and then we have a safeguarding information out as well. So check out those. They're all free. They're all free for members and part of the benefits of being a member. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks for all the questions. And if anybody has any further questions, drop me an email and I'll get on to Aidan and Susan. So we don't have any more questions. Aidan and Susan, do you have anything to add there before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll say maybe one thing to finish. Maybe we'll get that question. Let's just come in and then we'll wrap up.
Doreen, we're going to send you out some flowers for Valentine's Day. Thanks, Aidan, Susan, and Kieran. Really great session. Lovely.
Cool. So
Thanks,
the one
Doreen.
thing that I wanted to finish up with is try to be kind to yourself when you're learning how to roll. Okay, so just through some of the research that I did, a roll in terms of movement acquisition stuff is a gross, open, serial roll that takes place upside down in an environment that you can't breathe in. So just remember that when you're trying to roll. I think if I could describe a harder skill to someone who was in terms of movement acquisition, I don't think I could. So be kind to yourself when you're learning how to roll. Look after yourself. Don't overextend your shoulders. And maybe a little bit of mobility and flexibility training like yoga or Pilates or even some mild weight training will go a long way to helping you to roll and to be able to get out and enjoy paddling more. And that's what we all want to do. Yeah, like you said, fire on stuff to Kipper. I'm kind of a bit nerdy about these things, so I don't mind answering questions. And if you see me out on the water, just come over and ask those questions as well. I'm always pretty happy to help people out, stuff like that. If you see me rolling like rubbish, maybe give me a few tips as well. So thanks everyone for coming along tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Aidan. I'd like just to add as well a few bits that each one of us are different with different shapes, different heights, different abilities, flexibilities, body heights, and that there's a role out there for everybody, and then there's a role out there for whatever our purpose is. So a freestyle kayaker's role is going to be much different than you know, someone who maybe is just out touring on a lake in nice deep water, they're not worried about rocks, to someone who's kind of getting into moving water. So you kind of have to think when you're researching what role you want, and I'd like to see kind of learners or people learning the role to have a little bit more ownership of what role they learn, rather than just learning the one that your kayak instructor has decided everybody's going to learn. Okay, so picking a one that you think might suit your body type and shape, and then asking them, is it suitable for the environment that you want to use it in? I think that would be my top tip as well. And then what I'd also like to see, sorry, my cat is walking around the laptop here. She's gone.
She wants to roll as well.
She's my little old lady cat. There's no telling her no. And the other thing, I'd like to maybe get them to be able to demonstrate that role for you. Like, are they doing that role as well as are hoping to, you know, can they demonstrate it like they're teaching it? So if those two things match and it's a role that you think is going to be useful for you and your body type in the environment that you want to use it in, well, then it's good to go start learning it. But if you have any questions around that, or you don't think something's matching there, kind of maybe a little bit more of a conversation around why that particular one, or doing some research might be useful for yourself. So taking you as a learner, taking the ownership of the style of role that you want and that you need. Okay. And
super, guys. By the way, this has been recorded, so we will have it as a digital resource on the website. Thanks for tuning in, Aidan and Susan. Thanks a million for your time. Good night, folks. Thank you very much.
I was going to show the resource slides.
Oh, hang on.
Will I cue them up? Will I cue them up there? Hold on, sorry. I'm trying. Cool. I just would like to make a special mention here now at the end for someone who's put a lot of work in here. Okay, so this is a resource slide that can you guys see that? There we go. Okay, resources there. So this is just some videos that myself and Aidan recommend. You've got the how to roll a kayak, the sweep roll, that was from Acrobatics Calgary. Am I saying that right, Aidan? There's a combat roll there on Paddle TV. I think that one's quite good. There's a one by Ken Ford. I think it's called The Kayak Roll, or Bombproof Your Kayak Roll. It's about a 55-minute video. It's kind of made, I think, about 13, 14 years ago, but I just think everything in it is just as relevant today. And then there's a sea kayak and online sea kayak, and they have a little sample of their roll. So if you're not subscribed to their online platform, you can kind of watch, and it's very similar again to what myself and Aidan were covering there tonight. So they're the ones we definitely recommend having a look at. Aidan has recommended some books. So Kayak Rolling, Black Art Demystified by Lola Collins, and Rolling a Kayak by Ken Whiting. So if you're into reading versus watching, that might pick up some top tips out of that one as well. This I would really like to mention, if I have a minute. Enda McGuinness in Sligo Kayak Club, what a legend, right? So he attended the webinar last year. He attended the workshop in Donegal. He collected all the information and he put this resource together for his club. So to go up onto the wall of the club, so kind of everybody's on the same page around what the role is, how it's going to be put together, the lower body, the paddle path, the setup, linking it all together. And he's very kindly allowed me to share this with you guys tonight. And I think if every club were as lucky to have an Enda, it'd be amazing. But if every club could kind of come together on what they think are the fundamentals and the important parts in your club, and maybe putting even that little bit of a resource together for all members as well, would be really nice to have too. So yeah, thank you very much, Enda, for letting me share that with everybody. And I think here, Kipper, I'm going to pass this on to you. So if anybody wants it, or maybe it can go out with the resource pack that's been sent out. Sorry, now I'm definitely done this time now, Kipper.
No, it's perfect. People are dropping out. So once again, guys, thanks a million, and tune into the next few events that we have online. Thank you.